All right, guys, we're going to start today's show here very shortly. Do me a favor and hit that like button for me. Share the show. Tell your friends about today's show. We work hard putting this show together for you, and the only thing we ask of you, which I think is a very humble ask, is you hitting the like button anywhere you're watching. Share it with your friends. That would mean even more to us if you share the show onto your Facebook page or your social channels. Comment and participate on the show. That's the only humble ask or request we have. Thank you, Carol Thorpe. I appreciate you, Queen of Jack Jewett, Carol Thorpe. I really sincerely do. A lot we're going to cover today. We're going to honor, or try to honor, you talk about an incredible legacy. We're going to do our best to champion, spotlight, and highlight Coach Tommy Theodos. Thank you, Vanessa Parkhill, for liking the show. Vanessa Parkhill suggested that we cover this topic, and I have tremendous respect for the Queen of Earlysville. She said, highlight Tommy Theodos if you could on the show, and we're going to do just that. A man that undoubtedly deserves attention. We'll try to do our best to highlight some of his many accomplishments in this community. He passed away over the weekend. He has undoubtedly touched the lives of many in this community. Tommy Theodos, rest in power. City Attorney Lisa Robertson is leaving Charlottesville. In the words of Ray Charles, hitting the road, Jack, and she's not coming back. No more, no more, no more, no more. Lisa Robertson, the attorney for Charlottesville City, hasta luego. I'm going to ask you this question. When is the last time Charlottesville had all its executives active and hired? And the executives I'm referring to are city manager, police chief, fire chief, and city attorney. It has been a long time. In fact, I'm not even sure I know this answer. When is the last time the entire, if you may, C-suite of Charlottesville has been active and hired and working to guide this city? This has been a long time. We'll talk about that today on the I Love CVille show. We will also chatter on today's program the fact that there's been 3 shootings in the last 48 hours in the Charlottesville area. 3. It's time we recognize that there is undoubtedly a gang problem in this community. And we'll talk about the Hook getting restored on today's show. One of the best newspapers that I have ever read, The Hook. We'll talk about its restoration on today's program. Judah Wickower is our director. Make sure that 2 shots ready to rock and roll, Judah. Alex Erpy is our guest as well. He'll join us in about 20 minutes on today's show. I'm ready to rock and roll when you are, Judah Wickower.
Quiet on the set.
Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. It's a pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille network here in downtown Charlottesville. A lot we're going to cover on today's show, including Tommy Theodos' death, a man who touched this community in so many ways, on the track and field as a coach, on the gridiron as a head football coach, as a driver's education instructor, and the hallways. Tommy Theodos, his legacy and his reputation still rings true to today. As a former sports writer at the Daily Progress and a sports broadcaster at NBC 29 and with ESPN Radio, I remember hearing the legendary stories of Tommy Theodos in the newsrooms where I worked within. These stories were often told by stakeholders in our community like Jerry Ratcliffe, Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe, my first boss out of the University of Virginia. I'm going to relay some of these stories to you as I've heard them from folks like Jerry Ratcliffe, from folks like Joe Bingler, from folks like David Sloan, from folks like Coach Mike Cubbage, who at one time was a neighbor down the street of mine before he moved out of state and sold his home in Glenmore. Also on today's show, we'll talk Lisa Robertson. Yesterday, one of the most surprising aspects of the city council meeting was the news that Charlottesville City Attorney Lisa Robertson is hitting the road, Jack, and she's not coming back. No more, no more, no more, no more. Her last day, December 28th. Lisa Robertson has a pretty sterling reputation in this community as the city attorney for this jurisdiction. We'll talk Lisa Robertson's resignation, and I will ask you, the viewer and listener, this question. When is the last time Charlottesville, Virginia has had its C-suite active and leading this city at the same time in cohesive fashion? And I characterize the Charlottesville C-suite, the executive suite. C-suite is synonymous for the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, the executives of a company. And I look at Charlottesville City as a corporation, if you may, $200+ million yearly budget, Charlottesville City. I look at the C-suite as the city manager, who is the CEO, the police chief, the fire chief, and the city attorney. When it's the last time Charlottesville, Virginia has had those four positions filled with full-time workers, not interim, but full-time workers, and leading this 10.2 square mile jurisdiction that gets national notoriety on a regular basis. It's been a really long time, and I'm not even sure I have that answer for you, and I follow this stuff very closely. Also on today's program, we'll take a look at what is becoming a troubling trend and reoccurrence in the Charlottesville area. We have now had 3 shootings in the last 48 hours. Including one shooting on the UVA corner outside Christian's Pizza and Boylan Heights, and another shooting in a residential street in the Emmett Street Hydraulic Road area. The Emmett Street Hydraulic Road area shooting took place in the 5 o'clock hour yesterday. The shootings are no longer isolated to pockets of violence in the Charlottesville area. These shootings are rearing their ugly heads in the parking lots of $500 a night hotels, murders on the downtown mall, and a shooting on the University of Virginia corridor outside Boylan Heights as watering holes call last call and as patrons head out the door. If we don't start realizing that we have a gang problem in this area, we are not being honest with ourselves. On today's program, we will talk about the newspaper, the weekly newspaper, The Hook, being restored online, a Washington Post article that highlighted a catch and kill effort by what many anticipate is a wealthy financier who tried to destroy, disappear, and evaporate the Hook and its archives because this alleged wealthy financier was depicted in a negative light by this newspaper. The turn of events that have happened in the last 24 to 36 hours, we now have an anonymous entity that solely goes by F, the letter F, who has restored the Hook. That story for you on today's program. Lee Elberson, watching on LinkedIn. He asked this question, Jerry and Judah, is it just me or does Charlottesville have a significantly higher than average turnover of leadership? Lee, you're exactly right, my friend. And the word and the scuttlebutt around the streets of Charlottesville is you will be joining us for the holiday party tomorrow, Lee. And you will be donning a fabulously fantastic, ugly Christmas sweater while having that beautiful bride of yours on your arm. Let's welcome Judah Wickhauer to the program with the two-shot. How are you, Judah?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'd say we start with Tommy Theodos today. You okay with that?
Sure.
Alex Erpy will join us in a matter of moments. I want to relay some firsthand perspective on Tommy Theodos, a coach and a teacher and a driver's ed instructor, Judah, a molder of young men and women, a man whose name and reputation still ring loudly and positively today, a man whose moniker graces the football stadium at Charlottesville High School. Tommy Theodos passed away over the weekend. I would routinely see Tommy Theodos around town, and I first learned of Tommy Theodos' accomplishments as a bright-eyed, doe-eyed, bushy-tailed journalist at the Daily Progress and Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe's newsroom and sports department off Rio Road. I was very young on the Daily Progress beat and was entrusted with covering high school sports as a 22-year-old looking to gain some journalistic experience. High school sports, when you're new to journalism, consisted of volleyball, field hockey, cross country, lacrosse, basketball, and the pinnacle of what you covered, Friday Night Lights and high school football. High school football around this area still commands the type of attention that few athletics can duplicate. In fact, if you aggregate the attendance of home football games in the Central Virginia area on Friday nights, I can guarantee you all those Friday night home football games of high school football would surpass the attendance of a home football game at Scott Stadium on Saturdays at UVA. Charlottesville High School, when I started covering this team, had seen some better days. Garwin DeBerry was the replacement of Tommy Theodos of Joe Bingler. And Coach DeBerry was a class act. He himself had tremendous success on the gridiron. But when I started covering the Black Knights in Charlottesville football, it was 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, in that area. The team didn't have the type of success on the gridiron that it had early in Coach DeBerry's tenure and certainly throughout the Tommy Theodos and Joe Bingler terms. One thing I would constantly hear in the newsroom at the Daily Progress from Jerry Ratcliffe was Tommy Theodos, an incredible athlete, a football player, a track and field standout, a basketball superstar, a guy who went to the University of Richmond and had athletic success and then returned to his alma mater to lead Lane and CHS to glory. And what I'm going to do today is highlight Tommy Theodos, the man, the coach, the driver's ed instructor, the teacher, and the molder of young men and women. First, let's talk about Tommy Theodos, the athlete. Few people achieved the records and honors Tommy Theodos did as a player, and even fewer reached that distinction as a coach. And even fewer reached the levels of success of Tommy Theodos, the man. As a student at Charlottesville's Lane High School, Tommy Theodos earned 15 letters in 4 sports. I'll repeat that again. Tommy Theodos, as a student at Charlottesville's Lane High School, earned 15 varsity letters in 4 sports. He was an All-State and All-American as a quarterback in 1951. In 1951 and 1952, Tommy Theodos gained All-State credentials as a basketball player and set Lane scoring records. After a stellar athletic career at the University of Richmond, Tommy Theodos returned to Lane as a football coach and as a track coach. In 21 years of coaching football, Tommy Theodos enjoyed a record of 144 wins, 57 losses, and 8 ties. That's worth repeating, and I hope you're rotating the photos around. Thank you, Judah. Look at the screen as we champion this man's legacy. In 21 years of coaching football, Tommy Theodos posted an overall record of 144 wins, 57 losses, and 8 ties. His record and resume included 6 district championships and a state title in 1963. In one fantastic 5.5-year stretch, Tommy Theodos won 53 straight games. I will highlight that again. In a 5.5-year stretch, Tommy Theodos' teams won 53 straight football games. That accomplishment still stands as the longest non-losing streak in Virginia High School League history. In his 19 years of coaching track and field, Tommy Theodos' teams claimed 6 district championships, 2 regional titles, and 1 state championship. Tommy Theodos was named the Pepsi-Cola Scholastic Coach of the Year in both 65 and 1966. Tommy Theodos was named the 1975 National Football Clinic Master Coaching Award and was a nominee for the National Coach of the Year the following year. He is a member of the Virginia High School League Hall of Fame and the University of Richmond Hall of Fame. He was born on April 8th, 1933. He graduated from Lane High School. He graduated from the University of Richmond. And he undoubtedly has made this community proud. There was a message posted by someone who did not leave his name in a Facebook group that I'm a part of. And that Facebook group is Black Knights, How a Football Team Integrated a Town. This Facebook group and the man who posted this 8 or 10 paragraph commentary resonated and rang true with my soul and my heart. The man who wrote this clearly has a journalistic background. I'm going to relay what this individual wrote. I would love if you continued to rotate the photos of Tommy Theodos on screen. Here's what was posted on Facebook 5 hours ago. On September 11th, 1959, a 26-year-old first-year head coach named Tommy Theodos made his debut as Lane High School's head football coach. This may have been one of the most chaotic weeks in Charlottesville's history. Lane High School had desegregated 3 days before kickoff. Tommy Theodos, as a 26-year-old, beat Thomas Jefferson High School 27-13. It was a massive and monumental upset. Lane High School followed this win with a 7-6 victory against the 1958 Class H state champion Hermitage High School. Tommy Theodos became the Golden Greek in less than 10 days as a 26-year-old rookie head coach on the sidelines of Lane. And just like that, a legend had arrived to Charlottesville. The man who wrote this commentary continues. He says, I have interviewed over 100 people and have asked many open questions about Charlottesville, Lane High School, and its football program. One question this man always asked was his thoughts and opinions on Tommy Theodos. Here are a few snippets from those interviews about the man, the coach, and the teacher. Frankie Allen said this: Tommy Theodos had a charisma about him. He gave you a sense of security during a tough time. Discipline was Tommy Theodos. He did not treat anyone differently. I liked that he treated me as an equal. Joe Bailey said this: Tommy Theodos was one of the most important people that has ever been in my life, second to my father. David Trice said this: in practice, you ran it again, and then you ran it again, until he thought you got it right, and that's why we were pretty damn good. David Jones said this: he was no nonsense. He treated the last guy on the team like the first guy on the team. George Gay said this: you never wanted to disappoint Tommy Theodos. Jimmy Jones, JJ, relayed this story. We were in a game in my junior year. I was pretty cocky. It was the 6th or 7th game of the year. He sent in a play, a screen pass. It was 3rd down and 8. Dwayne Bickers was our senior captain. The guard brought the play in and said it was screen right. As soon as the guard told me the play, Dwayne said while standing in the huddle, Jim, you can't do that. They know a screen is coming. Look at them. They are already yelling screen. I said, yeah, but Coach Theodos set it in. Dwayne Bickers said, I would not run that if I were you. Jimmy Jones said, so as a dumbass, I changed the play and went to another pass, and it was incomplete as usual. As he jogged back toward the sidelines, Theodos met him with a harsh remark and grabbed his jersey and took him all the way off the field and sat his butt down on the bench. Coach Theodos told him, listen to me, young man. I am the coach and you are the player. If you ever think you are smart enough and old enough to coach this team, then I'll give you the damn whistle. Until then, I'm in charge and you are not. If I send in a play, run it. Jimmy Jones said, yes, sir. Tommy Theodos passed away this weekend. A driving instructor, a football coach, track and field coach, a man who helped Lane during its most difficult times as it welcomed black students into hallways. This man is Charlottesville, like Joe Bingler is Charlottesville. This holiday season, hug the folks in your life, because life is precious and it's short. A couple more topics I'd like to get to on today's show. First, I want to highlight that City Attorney Lisa Robertson has quit. Her last day is December 28th. Lisa Robertson became the city attorney on May 3rd, 2021, after serving as the interim city attorney since October 2020. Before that, she was an assistant city attorney. Lisa Robertson had a challenging tenure. Her tenure overlapped with Mayor Nakia Walker's term on council. By everyone I've spoken to, Lisa Robertson was doing a hell of a job. And currently, Charlottesville City does not have a full-time city manager. It's waiting for Michael Kotchis to take over as the police chief, which will happen in January. It does not have a full-time fire chief, and Lisa Robertson is resigning on the 28th of December. So on December 28th, you will not have a full-time city manager, you will not have a city attorney, you will not have a fire chief, and you won't have a police chief. All four of the top positions in Charlottesville's jurisdiction will be vacant on the 28th of December. All four. I'm going to ask you, the viewer and listener, this question. When is the last time Charlottesville City has had its entire C-suite active, hired, and on the payroll? And I'm not talking about consultants or interims, mercenaries. I'm talking about people that live in this community that collect a paycheck from Charlottesville City every 2 weeks. Does anyone know the answer to the question? I am not even 100% certain on this, and I follow this very closely. I believe the last time Charlottesville had a city attorney, a police chief, a fire chief, and a city manager active and employed at the exact same time, I believe was roughly 3 years ago, when Al Thomas was the police chief, when Andrew Baxter was the fire chief, when Maurice Jones was the city manager, and when Craig Brown was the city attorney. I want you to think about that. Nearly 3 years it's been since the entire C-suite has been active and employed by a Charlottesville city that self-proclaims itself as world-class. Why does Charlottesville City struggle to maintain leadership? Ask yourself that question. I don't have that answer. And Michael Kotchis, who's going to be the police chief of Charlottesville, is he now asking himself, what have I gotten myself into? You have had 3 shootings in Charlottesville City over the last 48 hours alone. You had a gunfight synonymous with the OK Corral and the shadows of the Omni Hotel, and you had a murder on the downtown mall. You had a shooting outside Boylan Heights over the weekend on the UVA corner. You had a shooting in a residential neighborhood yesterday in the 5 o'clock hour in the Emmett Street Hydraulic Road area. Now your city attorney has quit, you don't have a city manager in play, your police chief hasn't started yet, and there's no fire chief in play right now. On top of that, 3 of 5 city council spots are up for re-election in 11 months. To say that stability is a concern is an understatement. It's an understatement. And to say that this is continued collateral damage of the Nekiah Walker tenure is no longer applicable. It's no longer applicable. Something is in the water in this 10.2 square mile city where people don't stay on the job. And I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if you can. I certainly can. It's no secret that the scrutiny and the spotlight on Charlottesville is significant because of the pedigree and prestige of the University of Virginia, and because of the fact that this community is gentrifying rapidly and becoming a playground of wealthy, white, digital nomads and finance refugees. One other topic before Alex Erpy, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services and the co-star of Today y Mañana. The Hook has been restored. I'd like to go to a two-shot and welcome Judah Woodcower on this. The Hook, arguably the last great investigative journalism brand in Central Virginia.
Definitely. It was certainly a shame to see it go.
Undoubtedly. Hall Spencer, the leader of The Hook.
Yep.
Courtney Stewart, the first journalist hired by Hall Spencer. Mm-hmm. Lisa Providence, and David McNair. Coy Barefoot wrote for The Hook from time to time. It was a publication that I look forward to reading every week, and one that I very much enjoyed checking out online, in particular the comments below the articles, where stories would take other forms, new forms. Additional background would be provided by anonymous commentators. Essentially, it was social media before social media in Charlottesville. The Hook and its archive were sold by Bill Chapman and Blair Kelly to an anonymous party. Bill Chapman and Blair Kelly own the CVO Weekly. They took control of The Hook and its archive when The Hook merged with the CVO Weekly during difficult economic times as advertising dollars became sparse. When the merger with The Hook and the CVO Weekly transpired, Blair Kelly and Bill Chapman then owned The Hook and its intellectual property, which means the archive.
Yep.
Blair Kelly and Bill Chapman sold The Hook for a substantial amount of money to an unnamed party, and they did it to survive COVID. When they sold The Hook to an unnamed party for a substantial amount of money, this flew under the radar of many people. Very soon after that deal closed, The Hook evaporated and disappeared. Lisa Providence and David McNair and Courtney Stewart and Hall Spencer called it a catch and kill, where the unnamed party who purchased the archive did it for the sole purpose of eviscerating the archive to prevent the unnamed party's reputation from remaining online in negative capacity.
Yeah.
Now, there is no clear-cut indication of who purchased The Hook's archive, but a lot of indicators point to a University of Virginia graduate who allegedly, and I'm using the word allegedly, was caught up in a nasty rape circumstance. Courtney Stewart covered this very well, as she always does with all her journalism. And the alleged person, and I would encourage you to do some research on this, it's easily found online. The alleged person who was involved with the alleged rape ended up being a wealthy financier who now lives in DC that has significant disposable income. This particular individual allegedly purchased the hook to rehabilitate his brand online. Today, the hook has been returned. The Washington Post did an article about the catch and kill effort of this alleged buyer. And because of that Washington Post article and the global notoriety it received, another anonymous party who goes by the letter F purchased the hook or somehow got his or her hands on the archive
And brought them back.
and brought the archive back online.
Yeah.
There are lessons learned here.
Yeah.
And
if
the
you want-
lessons that I've learned here, you want to jump in?
Yeah, be careful of the Streisand effect.
You want to offer perspective on that?
Yeah, imagine if just a few of the articles, including the ones mentioning this alleged person, were to disappear from the overall archives. Probably nobody would be any the wiser for a very long time. But scrubbing the entire archives, all of a sudden you've got everybody talking about the Hook archives, and of course speculating on why somebody would want to get rid of them. You do yourself more harm by, taking such drastic actions as were taken here than you would have by, slowly and quietly maybe just deleting a few of the stories.
Other lessons I've learned are just because a brand is archiving its content online doesn't mean it's safe for perpetuity.
Yeah.
As a company that builds content for brands and businesses, you often realize the fickle nature of digitalized content. And digitalized content can be hacked. Websites can be forgotten to get renewed.
Yeah.
Websites can break. Websites are synonymous with an engine and an automobile. They need upkeep and repair and maintenance. And to think that you can just have an archive and leave it online without managing and massaging and protecting and preserving that archive is not realistic. A digital archive is not as safe as you think. And oftentimes, the hard copy archive that you can find at a library in microfilm
Microfilm, microfiche.
is safer than the digitalized version of it because it's tangible and palpable and located in one location. Either way, I'm excited that the Hook is back online. It's a 10 or 12 year documentation of Charlottesville, Virginia, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
We'll welcome Alex Erpy to the set here. Carol Thorpe says, Jerry, the answer to your question about the C-suite, maybe about 10 years ago, I recall all of those positions were filled with permanent and stable hires, as you say, during my third term as chairwoman of the Jefferson Area Tea Party in 2012 to 2013. That was the first year of Mayor Huja, following the term of Dave Norris. The C-suite employees included Maurice Jones as city manager, Craig Brown as city attorney, Tim Longo as police chief, and Charles Warner as fire chief. Thank you, Carol Thorpe, for leaving that comment. I believe in 2020, Al Thomas, police chief, Craig Brown, city attorney, Maurice Jones, city manager, and Andrew Baxter, fire chief, overlapped, although very, very briefly. Philip Dow, the King of Scottsville, says, Coach Tommy Theodos was my mentor. Jerry, you are bringing tears to my eyes now. Thank you for watching Philip Dow, the King of Scottsville. Warrior AG, watching the program. Albert Graves, hello. Lisa Costello says, how does the homicide rate of Charlottesville compare with other comparable cities? It is deaf much more than numbers, but stats will show us if these ills are worse in Charlottesville than other localities. I think it's a fair comment. My perspective is from a Charlottesville-focused perspective, in that for so long we have had such little gun violence that we've taken it for granted. Bill McChesney, the mayor of McIntyre, says there are many fond recollections he has of Coach Theodos on various Lane High School Facebook pages, and many of those were as a driver's ed instructor. Alex Erpy now on set, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, a friend of the program, and the co-star with the Erpy Men of Today y Mañana, Thursdays from 10:15 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. Alex, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
It's great to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to be on.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Getting close. Getting close.
Give us a snapshot of some of the festivities and traditions in the Erpy house, if you could.
In the Erpy house, there's a good number. Because the Italians very much celebrate Christmas Eve.
Okay.
As well. So there's always some kind of fish dish, or sometimes you do like picky food, like a little bit of everything. So that always takes place on Christmas Eve in the Erpy house. The Christmas morning, always my dad makes the melted Spanish hot chocolate. That's basically, it's different. It's not like your American Swiss Miss style. It's like you literally melt chocolate, and you either have it plain, or you can add like a little touch of milk to it, but it's basically just melted chocolate, and we'll have cookies with it, or sometimes my mom will make donuts or churros or something to go with it, and that's been as long as I can remember. Every Christmas morning right after opening the gifts.
That sounds delightful.
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
The holiday is one that's special for all families. Certainly at the Erpy household, I've learned over the last couple years of watching Today y Mañana evolve into just this fantastic program, that the Erpy men, a strong bond these men have together. And Judah and I often comment, we love the positive energy that comes with these four guys coming into our studio on a weekly, sometimes twice a week basis. My friend, we were hoping for potentially a Santa Claus rally to close the year.
I know. It doesn't look like we're going to get a full-blown Santa Claus rally. It seems like a lot more of what we've kind of been experiencing all year, which is some big days in the midst of a lot of down days, a lot of bear days. It's a tricky spot between the Federal Reserve still raising rates, which of course the market does not like. At the same time, at this point in the game, the impetus for the Federal Reserve to not raise rates would probably be because they foresee a slowdown, which also isn't positive news. So I think it's a tricky time to navigate.
Go ahead, Judah.
If at all, do the problems that Japan is currently experiencing affect those things?
Japan completely spooked the markets today. Not obviously stocks are up, but in terms of the overall financial capital markets, very surprised. No one really saw that one coming. It's an interesting one because Japan, of course, what they did, for those who aren't aware, their 10-year rate, the 10-year Japanese bond, essentially, right, is now able to move. Before they had basically, for the last decade plus, the Japanese have basically said, we have pinned the 10-year bond at this number, 0, and it's staying there. We will buy basically unlimited bonds as is necessary to keep this number at 0, and they're now letting that go. It's interesting because they're not really out of the kind of economic malaise that caused them to pin that number in the first place. But they're obviously seeing some serious issues in their capital markets, in their bond markets, that are causing them to have to pull back from this promise to basically print unlimited yen. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because 10 years ago, a lot of people thought that when they did this, that the yen was just going to collapse. Because they said, how do you have a country that says we will print unlimited yen to keep rates at 0 and not have some kind of hyperinflation? And they really didn't have that for a long time. And even now, it hasn't gone hyper or anything.
Yeah.
But obviously, they are seeing some underlying concerns beyond just the state of their economy that have caused them to say this is not something that's obviously tenable for them to continue going forwards.
Judah, jump in anytime you want. I love your questions here. It sounds like you have another one here.
Yeah, well, with I believe Japan is one of the largest owners of American debt. Is that also worrisome?
Not quite as much. They are one of the larger owners. The issue is everyone who's an owner of U.S. debt is kind of dwarfed by the Federal Reserve at this point.
Yeah.
So anyone who tried, usually there was concern, for example, 10 plus years ago, that the Chinese, who were at the time the second biggest owner, might attempt to dump U.S. debt to hurt the United States. But they only, because the fact that the Federal Reserve holds so much, they really only end up hurting themselves if they attempt to do that.
Gotcha.
I'd be surprised, given that the Japanese aren't really adversarial. I mean, they don't have any political gain to do so, and I don't think they have any financial incentive to do so. And I think the impact would be limited, because the Federal Reserve would basically say, okay, we're willing to make up this slack.
I want to jump in and offer a point of clarification from Carol Thorpe. Carol, thank you for holding us accountable. She highlights that Maurice Jones was not the city manager in 2020. So my anticipated period where Craig Brown and Al Thomas and Andrew Baxter and Maurice Jones were all C-suite and active at the same time as city manager, police chief, fire chief, and city attorney was incorrect. So Carol, thank you for holding me accountable. And it seems that Carol Thorpe may be right here.
Since 2012, did she say?
So she says the answer to the question about C-suite in Charlottesville City Hall may be 10 years ago. If she recalls, all those positions were filled with permanent and stable hires, as you say, during her third term as chairwoman of the Jefferson Area Tea Party, 2012 to 2013. That was the first year of Mayor Huja. Following the term of Dave Norris, the C-suite employees included Maurice Jones as city manager, Craig Brown as city attorney, Tim Lago as police chief, and Charles Warner as fire chief. So 10 years ago, the C-suite active in Charlottesville City Hall. Carol Thorpe, thank you for that insight, ma'am. I want to throw this to you, Alex Erpy. 2022, one to forget. Certainly for my portfolio, I don't want to speak for yours, but I would imagine yours as well. I was having a conversation with my father, who is in town to meet our newborn, and he was mentioning that his particular portfolio down about 15% for the year here. We all are optimistic. Well, many of us are
Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. Give us ammunition. And if you think I'm reading this incorrectly, please, I trust you, respect you here. Can we be cautiously optimistic for 2023, or do you feel that it's going to be more tough sledding in 2023?
Oh, no, I think we can be. I mean, there's a number. It's always difficult to know what will happen, but there's a number of historical parallels to here. First off, and Nicholas, my brother at Emergent Financial Service, he's pointed this out a couple times, that basically the historical record for the stock market in the third year of a president's term typically is a good one. That's usually because the Congress gets split. I mean, historically, the party that controls the White House ends up losing Congress, or at least a House of Congress, in the midterms. Thereby splitting it, that always tends to produce some kind of stability, which then theoretically leads to the markets doing well. Been a while since there were two in a row of a down year in the markets. That's also particularly rare, to have two consecutive negative years. So the fact that this year was negative would provide some cautious optimism for next year. And even if we look at, two other factors you could say is, I think it's pretty clear that even though the Federal Reserve is still raising rates and may do so maybe early in 2023, we're not going to see 8 rate hikes next year. It's not going to happen. So the constant increasing of interest rates is going to come to a stop at some point next year. Now, whether it reverses or not will depend on whether we enter recession or not. But at the very least, I don't think anyone foresees continuous rate hikes all next year as well. That would be reckless, probably beyond anything that we would expect even of this Federal Reserve, right? And so you then are left with, okay, do we enter recession? That would be kind of your damper. but we've seen plenty of times before that a recession does not necessarily cause a stock market crash, particularly if the crash preceded the recession. What's often unknown is, of course, 1929, Great Depression. That crash preceded the actual recession. So it's always difficult. It's not easy to say just because we might have an economic slowdown on Main Street that suddenly Wall Street will collapse as well. It's entirely possible that we sit here, we get a slowdown as a result of so many rate hikes, but we don't necessarily see a down year in the markets again. It might be a very tepid bull market. You might be sitting there at the end of the year and say, well, my portfolio is only up 5-10%. But I think there are certainly historical signs, and history, you know, it what do they say? It never repeats itself. So it might rhyme, but it never repeats itself. So it's not a guarantee that we're going to have an up year, but I certainly think there are reasons to be cautiously optimistic.
What concerns you?
The big concern at this point is a resulting slowdown from the Federal Reserve having hiked rates so much. This is something I talked about with Xavier a lot, that historically there is a lag between when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, thereby pulling money out of the economy, and when you see the effects of that. And the Federal Reserve always thinks, and it's not a particular knock against this set of, you know, Federal Reserve FOMC members, right? Every Federal Reserve going back to 1929 thinks that they've figured it out, and they can decrease the money supply just the right amount to get a handle on inflation, and there will be no problems. And they have a consistent track record of not being able to gauge that correctly. And it's not because they're stupid, it's because the economy is a very large, multivariable creation, amalgamation of millions upon billions of individual decisions. And it is impossible to be able to predict with certainty, yes, if I raise rates this many times, this is going to be the effect. You can't know it. So the concern is that they've done too much and don't know it, or on the flip side, that they have not moved the needle sufficiently on inflation, and we are going to be stuck with a slowing economy and still lingering inflation, because the PPI number was still not particularly promising, so that's the inflation that's being faced by producers before it gets to the store shelves. That number, again, the issue we're having is inflation may be coming down in the sense of, instead of 0.4 month over month, it's 0.2 month over month. That's still prices going up, and that's still a very hard situation for the average consumer. So those are the two concerns, that either they've gone so far that we are going to hit something, we're going to crash, or that for if inflation is the result of contradictory fiscal policy where we've spent gobs of money that's undoing the interest rate hikes, that we're going to be sitting there with persistent high prices and a slowdown. Those, I think, would be the headwinds that you'd say that's the cautious part of the cautious optimism.
Alex Serpe, CEO of Emergent Financial Services, dropping knowledge. Judah, jump in here anytime you want. I want to highlight the fact that, and this is something that I'm going to be dealing with in a phone call in about 20 minutes here, home builder sentiment, National Association of Home Builders, is at a low last seen in 2012. So we're at a, nearly 11-year low with new construction, home builder sentiment. That's essentially confidence with home builders, with the conditions they have in their economy. Walmart and Target have highlighted, and these are some of the largest retailers out there, that the $100,000 plus households are now shopping more than ever at their locations, and they're not going deep into their wallets with shopping. They're cutting back. It's a recessionary sign. They're cutting back. We've highlighted from a Charlottesville Main Street standpoint, pints of beer are $8 now, and it's not a reflection of the brewer looking to hustle or make as much money as possible. It's a reflection of cost of goods being out of control. And they need $8 prices on their pints just to essentially get darn near close to breaking even here.
And remember, that's a very competitive industry.
Extremely competitive.
So
Saturated.
it's very difficult in that industry for one or two suppliers of beer to just be jacking up the price to make exorbitant profits.
Exactly right.
If that price is going up in a competitive industry, it's because cost of goods has gone up.
Exactly right. That's exactly right here. So I'm trying to, because I'm a glasses half full guy, I'm looking for leverage or ammunition to be able to highlight going into the first quarter with, say, my clients on our B2B roster, an advertising agency, where I'm routinely meeting with them or Zooming with them or conference calling with them, as you are in your business,
Absolutely.
right? Of what is the perspective you're sharing with your clients of this is what could happen and why we are optimistic here.
So basically, it's just reminding clients that the number one thing is you need to look at your risk. And one of the things that happened this year that is not likely to repeat is the fact that, let's face it, the reason in a normal stock market scenario, your portfolio and your dad's portfolio should not be down, both of them, this much in this year, right? Because you would expect your dad's portfolio to be safer.
It is.
More bonds.
That's right.
Than yours.
Right.
So even if there was a stock market crash in a normal year, you'd say, well, yep, in a stock market crash, Jerry's going to lose a lot, Alex is going to lose a lot. Your dad is not going to lose a lot. My dad's not going to lose a lot because they are more invested in bonds. This year, that didn't happen. Because of the fact that the Federal Reserve raised rates so much, bonds also got hammered. Very rare. Economics 101 is typically 9 times out of 10, stocks go up, bonds go down, stocks go down, bonds go up. It's typically the way that works. They have a minor inverse relationship. This year, they both went down. Highly unusual. Also, unless the Federal Reserve shocks us all by raising rates 8 times again next year, which I think is highly unlikely, that scenario is not likely to be repeated. So if you are sitting there with a safe portfolio, you would not expect that to be hammered again. Particularly if you've made some smart decisions this year, if you moved into some floating rate bonds, if you made other wise decisions, because bonds is much more mathematical than stocks. Right? If I sit there and I'm holding a 5-year bond and the Federal Reserve raises rates, yes, the price of my bond goes down. But I know that I get my money back in 5 years, which means as that bond approaches maturity, as it approaches the point where I get my money back, that price has to go back to even. Mathematically, it goes back to 100, particularly if it's a government bond. In other words, if the company's not going bankrupt or anything, right? Stocks, there's nothing that forces stocks to go back up. You could have a company, stock goes down, and for the rest of its existence, it stays at this lower price, right? Bonds don't work that way. There is a mathematical impact of bonds. So one of the things we're telling our clients is, look, you have to recognize this year for what it was, but you cannot let it impact the strategy that you are looking at, because your strategy should be based on the level of risk that you can afford to take, not what happened this year. Strategy should not be based on this happened in 2022, ergo I should completely transform my portfolio for 2023. That's a recipe to chase disaster. So we just tell our clients, look, the headwinds are still there. There are some historical reasons to be optimistic that it's very rare to have 2 negative years in a row. Very rare that you would have a down year in the 3rd term of a presidency, right? Doesn't mean it can't happen, but one of the things we are looking at is saying, okay, there is probably going to be a little more safety in bonds in 2023 than there was in 2022, because this year was just something very unprecedented in that relationship.
Judah, thoughts?
This involves more what you're talking about with real estate, but I think also with the rest of the market as well. I think demographics are showing that the population is starting to peak and decrease. A lot of the industry across the world is based on an ever-growing population. will inflation become endemic if and when the population stops increasing? I mean, for instance, I read something recently where somebody made this point about home ownership. It's obviously a massive upfront transfer of wealth from younger people to older people, on the implicit promise that when those young people become old, there will be new young people willing to give them even more money. And of course, as prices rise, the only young people able to buy into this Ponzi scheme are quite well-to-do already themselves. So what happens when populations start to decrease and less people are able to afford the houses that have been for so long expected to continue rising and being a form of probably one of the, give or take, more stable instruments of
Sources of building wealth.
yeah.
Oh, it's number one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think you have to qualify it. It's,
What do you make of that?
two different things. On the inflation side, that would, whether or not inflation becomes persistent as a result of population no longer increasing, depends on how the Federal Reserve reacts to the money supply. So in other words, indeed, if you kept your money, the way it's supposed to work is that the money supply of a country is supposed to increase over time as its population increases, thereby keeping like a balance between the amount of money floating around per person. So in other words, per capita. As more people are born, as the population increases, you increase the money supply slowly over time. If population starts stagnating or decreasing, then if you were to ignore that fact and keep printing money and increasing the money supply, you will eventually have persistent inflation because the money supply is going to keep outpacing the actual population growth. If you react and say, well, we need to now constrict or sort of keep the money supply stable, theoretically you wouldn't have that inflation. Now, what you would have in that scenario is we would be living in a world in which the super low interest rates that we've been enjoying for the last 20 years no longer exist. In other words, you can't keep the money supply stable or shrinking by keeping rates at zero.
Yeah.
Right? So you're living in a new paradigm at that point. The U.S., I think is it 2050 that it's supposed to peak based on current demographics, our population. So we're still growing now, but at a decreasing rate. So we're increasing, but not quite as fast as we used to be, and we're approaching the top of that mountain. As far as the housing situation goes, it's interesting because you obviously have two conflicting forces at work there, because where we currently are now is an undersupply of housing. But as Judah points out, the long-term demographics might suggest, particularly if you have a generation of young people who cannot afford to buy houses, then in theory, that would reduce the demand, reduce the price there where they can afford it again. If institutions come in and start just gobbling that up, then you just end up with a class of renters, which has its own long-term repercussions, because
That scares me.
yeah, that frightens me a little more there, because Judah's absolutely correct. Between 1950 and the present, the number one source of wealth generation in this country has been, for the middle class, has been the ownership of homes, because they have gone up in price, starting with the GI Bill that they passed right after the 50s. That is your source of wealth generation, and you can see it too in the populations that were sort of kept out of that GI Bill that did not generate anywhere near that level of wealth. You can see it. And so to have a generation of renters, if you would get a generation of long-term renters, then you're relying on retirement savings alone in a fluctuating stock market to generate that kind of living in retirement. And it's
a scary proposition.
It doesn't keep quite the same pace. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but one of your major sources of wealth generation particularly from generation to generation, passing it down to your kids, is gone.
Travis Hackworth in Danville is giving you props. He's saying you're 100% spot on. Thank you, Travis, for watching the program.
Thank you, Travis.
I also am checking out the DM that you sent me. We'll see if we can weave that into tomorrow's show, Travis. Do you ever expect interest rates in the 2, 3, or 4%
Range.
for housing again?
Again? I mean, it's certainly possible if next year, as an example, let's say we hit a very big recession next year, Federal Reserve is going to turn around and decrease interest rates again. Whether the question then becomes what the housing market does. In other words, if there's a lot of concern about mortgages, then your spread stays wide. Because remember, the mortgage rate is based first, like all interest rates. The mortgage rate is your prime rate. That's the rate that the Federal Reserve, that's kind of your risk-free rate that the Federal Reserve is setting, plus a spread. The spread is basically compensating for the fact that a mortgage, from a lending perspective, a mortgage is more risky than buying a government bond. So if I'm going to buy a government bond at 3%, I'm not going to lend you money for a mortgage at 3%, because the government bond has no risk, relatively speaking, right? And the mortgage does. So those are two elements. So as an example, if the Federal Reserve drops rates again to 2%, but the housing market starts looking like it's got serious problems, that people can't pay their mortgages, and mortgages becomes extremely risky, you might see a big spread. And so mortgage rates might not come back down to 2 to 4. If we get a recession that doesn't impact the housing market, and we don't end up with a repeat of 2008, where housing kind of looks fine, nobody's underwater. If they are, they're continuing to pay, right, their mortgage payments, no one's defaulting. Then you could have a scenario where the Federal Reserve says we have no choice but to reverse course, drop rates, and mortgage rates come back down to the 2 to 4% range. So a lot of that will depend on what happens next year. I don't think we're quite at long term. Just what Judah's talking about with demographics is what we'd call in economics the very long term. In other words, that's when you start looking in 10 to 20 year windows. Over the very long term, yeah, we could be looking at a different paradigm, but that doesn't mean that within the next 10, 15 years we wouldn't see rates come back to 2 to 4%. We could see that in the next decade, even if the longer term trend would be leading us in a different direction.
William Clark, thank you for sharing the show. If you have anything to add, jump in here. Bernardo Martinez says, you got that right, Jerry. The Erpies have the touch to make sure you feel welcome in any area, especially on Today y Mañana and their program.
Kind.
Happy holidays to all of you guys from Bernardo Martinez.
Oh, thank you, Bernardo. Happy holidays to you as well.
Watching the program as we speak. Anything you want to add before we highlight Today y Mañana on Thursday? And we'll get to a close here from Greenwood, from the king of Greenwood himself.
No, I think if my brain gets any more wrinkles today, it'll probably explode.
It'll explode. Today y Mañana, we'll give some time to see what you guys have in the docket
Today,
for Thursday.
It's really simple. It's our holiday show. It's going to be all 4 Erpies.
I love it.
Probably Santa hats.
I love it.
Just like last year, talking some Christmas traditions. I'm sure Nick will bring up some Christmas trivia. You know that longtime viewers of the show will know that there are few things Nick enjoys more than trying to stump Xavier. So he will attempt to stump Xavier with some Christmas trivia, just some fun, some laughter, just something a little lighthearted with the 4 Erpies before, but it'll be 3 days before Christmas?
Yeah, 3 days before Christmas. Kevin Higgins, you're a good man. He says, what have the 3 of you guys learned through the pandemic and madness leading today? What has made I Love Seville and Emergent Financial Services better this year?
Oh, that's a great question. What has made it better? It's just, I think, to be honest, just from my perspective, an even increase in just the comfort and confidence of being out there on Today y Mañana. I mean, Xavier and I had never done anything remotely close to what we do on Today y Mañana before 2020. I mean, if you hadn't reached out to us and said, hey, you guys want to do a show involving Latino entrepreneurs, getting out there, we would never have thought like, oh yeah, let's take Xavier and myself and put us in front of a camera and see what happens. So you get a joy, I think an increased joy, really embracing. I know Xavier in particular has just so much, after having spent so long, really most of his career was in finance, but working with a lot of institutions, cities, counties, helping them a lot. He's just completely in love and embraced helping families and individuals to do the same things that he was helping institutions do. He's just leaps and bounds. He has jumped into that. I mean, Nicholas and I had already started going down that road when we started Emergent, but really the pandemic was when we started getting a lot more people coming in and saying, I need financial planning help. And to sort of take on that level of trust and be saying, we're glad you're finally reaching out on that vein. In other words, now that times are tough, you're reaching out and looking for that kind of support has been just really heartwarming for us, and just really love. Maybe it's just coming to the realization how much we just enjoy talking with people. Because half the time, I mean, I tell you, our clients come in, we talked some of finance, right? But so much of the conversation, I'd say 30 minutes out of an hour-long consultation is just, how are things going? How's your family doing? What's going on? What can we help you with? And that really we have embraced in the last few years and realized how much we love it, which just brings an added joy to every day. So that, between that and Today Mañana, has been a huge blessing for us this year in particular.
I love it. I love these guys. Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network, Today Mañana, presented by Emergent Financial Services. And you can see what Alex Erpy is all about and what his family is all about. If you need trusted advisors to help you guys get finances in order and to the finish line that we call wealth building and retirement, Emergent Financial Services should be your choice. Character and honesty and integrity, they embody all those qualities.
Thank you. And can I just say, this is now 2 years of this segment.
I love it.
I love it.
We love having you.
It's just such a pleasure. I love being on with you. I love chatting with you and Judah. I love the equilateral triangle of content, and just the things that you each bring to the table, the different perspectives. It challenges me, Judah especially. Has some great questions. The way you both challenge me to think about, okay, yeah, these are questions that someone who's not, doesn't sit on this day by day thinks about, and how to sort of explain them. And sometimes you both think out of the box, which really helps me to then say, hey, you know what's beyond what I've learned from doing this in the years that I've been doing this, from the studies and the exams. What else is out there to think about that the average person, it's on their mind. So I really loved being here on Tuesdays with both of you.
Well, it's truly our pleasure. Judah Wickhauer contributed mightily, to this program, as he always does, and I concur. It is a joy. That's today's show. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We will be in the saddle tomorrow at 10:15 a.m. for a Christmas party extravaganza. Alex will be here. You'll see Judah. Actually, you won't see Judah. Instead, you'll see Frosty the Snowman. I will not be here. Instead, you'll see Buddy the Elf, and Chris Kringle will be sitting across from me. And local luminaries and superstars and rock stars will be in attendance, as I believe the holiday list somehow has gone from a promised 8 people to now over 30 people. The excitement and momentum that is Keith Smith shows itself in a holiday list.
Poor Judah, the bottom bar is just going to say rotating person.
I don't even think we're going to have a lower third. I don't think there's going to be names on screen.
I don't think it's worth it.
It would just be so difficult.
Every person will have to submit their 2 guests to me before they go and sit down.
I just don't think we have a nameplate. No. I would just introduce yourselves on screen by saying, my name is so-and-so.
Just put beloved guest.
Just be like, Charlottesville, champions of Charlottesville.
There you go.
That's what we'll call it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. Judah, job well done. That's the I Love CVille show, guys. We'll see you tomorrow at 10:15. Take care.
Oh, that's gonna be a blast tomorrow. So, is Judah really? Is Judah really? You're gonna really put on Frosty?
He's gonna be Frosty.
Wow.